Welcome back, everybody. For today's deep dive, we're exploring the life and work of William Styron.
Yeah, one of the titans of American literature.
Absolutely a literary giant, but also a man who struggled
Oh, yeah, for sure.
with some pretty intense inner demons.
Inner turmoil,
You
yeah.
might recognize his name from award-winning novels like Sophie's Choice.
Oh, absolutely. Or The Confessions of Nat Turner.
But the book that we're really zeroing in on today is his memoir, Darkness Visible.
A raw and honest look at his battle with major depression.
Exactly. And it really gets to the heart of this fascinating and sometimes troubling link between creativity and mental illness.
Exactly.
And what really struck me right away in the book was this incident in Paris.
Oh, yeah, tell me about that.
Styron was there to receive this, very prestigious literary award, right?
A moment of, triumph and celebration.
Exactly. But he describes this feeling of almost like his world was closing in on him.
Wow.
And he even talks about losing the $25,000 prize check,
Oh, no.
which is crazy.
Yeah.
And it almost feels like some subconscious act of self-sabotage.
Yeah, that detail really stood out to me, too, because it speaks to the insidious nature of depression, right?
It does.
How it can distort our perceptions and our actions, even when things seem to be going well outwardly. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. It's like this inner turmoil is bleeding into his external reality in a way.
Yeah, it's almost like a physical manifestation of that inner struggle.
But this wasn't just like a fleeting moment of sadness or something,
Right, this was the full force of a major depressive episode.
Styron goes on to describe the insomnia, the loss of appetite.
The crippling inability to concentrate.
It's really hard to read at times, honestly.
It is. It's really harrowing.
And the way he describes the psychological torment, he uses words like drowning and suffocating.
But he even says that those words don't quite capture it.
Right. It's like searching for language that can express the inexpressible almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He talks about it like being trapped in a burning room with no escape. Just this constant searing mental pain.
Now, you mentioned earlier that Styron connected his depression to a sense of loss.
He did, yeah, and particularly losses from his childhood.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, so the loss of his mother when he was just 13 years old,
Oh, wow.
and his father's own struggles with mental illness.
Yeah,
These were, deep wounds that never really fully healed.
right.
And he believed they contributed to this concept of incomplete mourning.
Incomplete mourning.
Yeah, which resonates with the research of Howard de Kushner.
Okay, I'm not familiar.
So Kushner, who wrote Self-Destruction in the Promised Land,
Okay.
argues that unresolved grief can fester and manifest in these self-destructive behaviors.
Oh, wow.
And Styron felt that he never fully processed the grief of losing his mother,
Right.
and that this unresolved pain, played a role in his later struggles with depression.
So it's almost like this emotional baggage that you carry with you, even if you're not consciously aware of it.
Precisely. And it's fascinating because this concept of incomplete mourning, even has historical parallels.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Kushner cites Abraham Lincoln as an example,
Wow. Okay.
arguing that Lincoln's own battles with suicidal thoughts
Oh, wow.
may have stemmed from his mother's death.
That's incredible.
That's-
So are you suggesting that maybe Styron's creative genius, like his ability to delve into these really complex human emotions, was somehow connected to these early experiences of loss and trauma?
It's a really complex question, and, there's no easy answer.
Right.
But what is undeniable is that the theme of suicide recurs throughout Styron's work.
Yeah, you see it again and again.
In Lie Down in Darkness, The Confessions of Nat Turner.
Even Sophie's Choice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's almost as if he was, subconsciously grappling with these dark forces long before they fully consumed him,
Yeah, it's chilling, almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
His portrayal of depression.
especially in his female characters.
Right, is so eerily accurate. And it makes you wonder, did this intuitive understanding come from his own subconscious struggles?
Absolutely. And that leads us to another critical part of Styron's story, his journey seeking help. He initially resisted treatment.
Which is so common.
Yeah, he thought he could conquer this on his own.
As many of us do.
Yeah.
Especially when we feel like we're, in control.
Yeah, a man used to being in control of his mind.
But his condition just kept getting worse.
It did.
And he was eventually hospitalized as a last resort.
Oh, last resort.
And even then, he really struggled to articulate the depths of his despair.
He did. Yeah, he famously criticized the word depression itself,
I remember that.
arguing that it was inadequate,
Yeah.
even trivializing.
Didn't he want to use different words like brainstorm or madness.
Yeah, he preferred terms like brainstorm or
Yeah,
madness
that's right.
to convey the true violence of what was happening inside of him.
Wow, he felt like the language failed to capture the intensity of the experience.
It did. And speaking of intensity,
Yeah.
he actually found a sense of peace in the hospital, which might seem counterintuitive.
It does seem kind of strange at first.
Right. But think about it for a second.
Okay.
The hospital, with all of its sterile coldness,
Yeah.
provided him with a sense of structure,
Oh.
of safety.
Right.
It was a place where he could finally just let go of control and simply be.
That makes sense.
Yeah, a stark contrast to the chaotic world outside, where
yeah.
he felt constant pressure to perform to maintain this image of the successful writer.
So it was almost like a form of surrender.
It was a surrender.
Way of acknowledging his vulnerability.
Exactly. And in that surrender, in allowing himself to be cared for, he started to find a glimmer of hope.
That's powerful.
Yeah. And it's at this point that things start to turn around for Styron.
This is where we see the first signs of recovery.
Yeah, we'll delve into that recovery and the long road back to the light in just a moment. But first, a quick word from our sponsors.
Don't go anywhere.
One thing that I found really interesting was how Styron talked about his experiences with group therapy and art therapy in the hospital.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more about that, because it always kind of struck me as ironic that, this guy who built his entire career on words.
Right, wordsmith.
Found more solace in visual art.
Exactly. And, he actually describes the group therapy as being somewhat frustrating.
Okay.
But the art therapy was different. It provided him with this nonverbal outlet for his emotions.
Right. And I guess that makes sense when you think about, someone who's really struggling to put into words.
To articulate.
Yeah, the depth of their despair.
Exactly. It's like bypassing that language barrier altogether
Mhm.
and tapping into something more primal.
And this is where we start to see the seeds of Styron's recovery, right?
Yeah, he describes the slow return of sleep,
Oh, wow.
the vivid dreams that he started having after months of insomnia.
Okay.
And there's this one dream in particular.
Tell me about it.
It involves a flute, a wild goose, and a dancing girl.
That's beautiful imagery.
Yeah, and he interprets it as a symbol of hope and renewal.
It speaks to that innate human resilience that even in the darkest of nights, there's this flicker of light waiting to be rekindled.
Absolutely. And speaking of hope,
Yeah.
Styron also really emphasizes the importance of external support.
Right. He talks about his friend, the newspaper columnist.
Yeah, who had also battled severe depression.
Okay.
And his friend's unwavering support was a lifeline for him.
And I think there's something so powerful about that.
There is.
Because someone who has been through it.
Who's navigated those treacherous paths.
Exactly. They have a map of the terrain, and they can offer a unique kind of guidance.
A shared understanding.
And, Styron's story also really challenges the stigma surrounding mental illness.
It does.
Here's this brilliant Pulitzer Prize-winning author.
A giant of American literature.
Brought to his knees by this invisible foe.
Yeah. It's a powerful reminder that depression doesn't discriminate.
It really doesn't.
It can affect anyone, regardless of their achievements or their intellect or their perceived strength.
Right. And it really gets back to, Styron's criticism of the word depression itself.
Exactly. He felt like it didn't capture the intensity.
It just didn't feel adequate.
The all-consuming nature of the illness.
And he wanted a word that, really conveyed the violence of the experience.
Something like brainstorm or madness.
Do you think he had a point?
I do. I think the language we use shapes our understanding, and perhaps a more evocative term would help people to grasp the severity of the condition.
It would challenge those harmful stereotypes.
Exactly, and help us recognize depression for what it truly is, a real debilitating illness that requires compassion and support.
So what can we learn from Styron's experience?
Yeah, what are the key takeaways here?
From his descent into the abyss and his eventual climb back to the light.
Well, I think first and foremost, his story underscores the importance of early intervention and support. Reaching out for help. It's not a sign of weakness.
No.
It's a sign of strength. It takes courage to acknowledge that you need help, that you can't fight this alone.
And he shows us that recovery is possible.
It is.
Even from the deepest despair.
Even from the darkest depths.
But it often requires a multi-pronged approach.
Absolutely.
Therapy, medication, a supportive environment.
Sometimes a radical shift in perspective.
Exactly. And his journey highlights the importance of destigmatizing mental illness.
For sure.
Creating a culture where people feel safe seeking help.
Right.
Where vulnerability is seen not as a flaw,
but as a shared human experience.
Yeah, he reminds us that we're all in this together.
We are.
And we need to offer each other compassion and understanding.
And to never give up hope.
Right, on ourselves or on those that we love.
And this brings us back to that central question
that we always seem to grapple with on this show.
Yeah, the link between creativity and mental illness.
Right. Does the darkness fuel the art?
Are creative individuals inherently more vulnerable?
Or is it a matter of sensitivity, of a heightened capacity for empathy?
It's a tough one.
Styron himself seemed to grapple with these questions throughout his life and work.
He did.
He acknowledged the presence of depression in his writing long before he experienced its full force.
Right, and his portrayal of the mental landscape of depression is so vivid, so accurate.
It really is.
That it's hard to believe it didn't stem from some deep well of personal experience.
It's almost as if he was subconsciously exploring this terrain in his writing.
Yeah, mapping the contours of despair.
Before he himself was fully engulfed by it.
Exactly, and that's what makes his story so compelling, so tragically beautiful.
It forces us to confront the complexities of the human condition.
It does.
To acknowledge the darkness that exists within us all.
And to appreciate the resilience of the human spirit.
So where does this leave us?
What's the final word on this age-old question of creativity and mental illness?
Well, I don't know if there is a final word. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's probably one of those questions that's always going to be with us.
Right. It's kind of like the human mind itself.
Exactly. Elusive and complex, but, I think grappling with these questions...
Even if we don't find any easy answers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what's crucial. Styron's story encourages us to really think critically about this link between creativity and mental illness.
To move beyond these kind of simplistic and romanticized notions of the tortured artist.
Right.
To really appreciate all the nuances of mental health.
I mean, his experience shows just how debilitating depression can be,
It really does.
How it can sap your creativity, your energy, your will to live.
And it's interesting because he actually found solace.
In a place that we often associate with confinement and despair.
Right.
He describes it as a way station. This necessary pause in his life's journey, a place where he could finally surrender to the process of healing.
It seems counterintuitive, but I can see how the structure and the safety of that environment could be a relief, especially when you're feeling so overwhelmed and out of control.
Exactly. It provided him with a sense of stability, and it allowed him to really delve into the root of his illness.
And that's where he starts to connect the dots, right?
Which he does.
Between his childhood trauma, the unresolved grief over his mother's death.
And his later struggles.
He's able to piece together the puzzle of his own life in a way.
Right. He starts to understand how those early experiences really shaped his psyche and contributed to his vulnerability later in life.
And that's such a powerful message, right?
It is.
The importance of acknowledging and addressing past trauma, not about dwelling in the past.
Right. It's about understanding.
But understanding how those experiences continue to shape us.
Even subconsciously sometimes.
And thankfully for Styron, the story doesn't end in the hospital.
No, it doesn't.
He did find his way back to the light, to a renewed appreciation for life and for his craft.
For creativity.
And he even talks about having his first dream after months of insomnia, this really vivid, hopeful image.
Oh, yeah, the flute, the wild goose, and the dancing girl.
Such powerful imagery.
Yeah.
Like a symbol of his own rebirth.
A reminder that even in the darkest of nights,
there's potential for renewal.
There's potential for hope.
It really is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit.
Absolutely.
That even in the face of unimaginable despair, there's this spark within us that yearns for life, for connection.
For beauty.
And ultimately, I think that's what Styron's story leaves us with.
A sense of hope.
A reminder that recovery is possible.
Even from the depths of darkness.
It's a call to action,
It is.
To destigmatize mental illness, to create a culture where people feel safe seeking help.
Where vulnerability is seen as a strength, not a weakness.
And where creative individuals are supported and celebrated, not just for their art,
but for their humanity.
And maybe in understanding these complexities.
Embracing both the darkness and the light.
We can unlock even greater depths of creativity, empathy, and connection.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the life and work of William Styron.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.